A Chinese company just placed an order for 60 gigawatt hours of batteries that contain no lithium at all. Not a small pilot run, not a lab test. 60 gigawatt hours. That is enough energy to charge every single smartphone on Earth at the exact same moment. And the material at the heart of these batteries is so cheap and so common that you already have some sitting in your kitchen right now. The company is CATL. If you have never heard that name, you should learn it. Because CATL is the largest battery maker on the planet. They build the batteries inside cars from Tesla, BMW, Ford, and dozens of others. When CATL places an order this size, the whole industry stops and watches. And here's the part that made engineers around the world sit up. Just 2 years earlier, this exact type of battery was being called a dead end, a science fair idea, something that would never work at scale. Serious people in the battery business said it out loud, this chemistry has too many problems. It will never leave the lab. Then KTL solved a problem that had blocked this technology for almost 40 years. And the moment they solved it, the math changed for everyone. The battery is built around sodium, and sodium comes from something you shake onto your food every night. Table salt. The ocean is full of it. Every country on Earth has access to it. You cannot corner the market on salt. You cannot run out of salt. And that single fact is why this story is so much bigger than one order. Because the battery inside your phone, your laptop, and most electric cars runs on lithium. And lithium has a problem that no amount of engineering has ever fully fixed. So a Chinese company went looking for a way around it. What they found could reshape the entire market for stored energy. Before we get into it, if you enjoy videos like this, hit the like button right now. These take a serious amount of research and time to put together, and every like pushes this to more people who would find it interesting. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story out of China builds directly on this one. Now, to really understand why this matters, you have to understand why lithium won in the first place. Go back to the early 1990s. Before then, the batteries in your gadgets were heavy, weak, and short-lived. Then Sony launched the first commercial lithium battery in 1991, and it changed everything. Lithium roughly tripled how much energy you could pack into the same space. That one jump made the modern world possible. The smartphone in your pocket, the thin laptop in your bag, wireless earbuds, electric cars. None of it works without lithium. Every device you own that runs on a battery owes its existence to that 1991 breakthrough. So why does lithium work so well? The answer is size. Lithium particles are tiny and light. They also have a strong drive to push electric current. Small, light, and eager to move. That combination is close to perfect for a battery. It packs a lot of energy into very little weight. For 30 years, nothing came close. Over $1 trillion flowed into lithium technology across those decades. Mines opened, factories rose, whole national plans were built around it. When one technology wins that completely, people stop looking for anything else. Why would they? The winner is right there and it works. But here's the thing. Lithium has flaws baked into its chemistry, and they are not small. The first flaw is fire. The liquid inside a lithium battery, the part that lets the current flow, is flammable. Under the right stress, a lithium battery can enter something engineers call thermal runaway. That is a chain reaction. One cell overheats, which heats the cell next to it, which heats the next one. Once it starts, it is very hard to stop. You have seen the results even if you did not know it. In 2016, Samsung's Galaxy Note 7 phone started catching fire. Airlines banned them from planes. Samsung recalled every single one. That disaster cost the company about $5 billion. All because of the chemistry inside a battery smaller than your hand. And it is getting worse, not better, as we put more of these batteries into daily life. In 2026, lithium battery fires passed electrical fires as the leading cause of deadly fires in New York City. Think about that for a second. Not faulty wiring, not gas leaks, batteries. The same batteries in the e-bikes and scooters parked in hallways and charging overnight. The second flaw shows up in the cold. When the temperature drops near freezing, lithium batteries can start forming tiny metal spikes inside called dendrites. These spikes can grow and cause short circuits. Cold also drains range fast. At freezing temperatures, a lithium battery can lose 20 to 40% of its total range. If you drive an electric car in a cold climate, You already know this pain. On a hard winter morning, you can lose more than 100 kilometers of range before you even leave the driveway. The car did not break. The chemistry just hates the cold. The third flaw is not about the battery at all. It is about the ground. Lithium comes from a small number of places. That makes its price wild. Between 2020 and 2022, the price of raw lithium material rose eightfold, 8 times higher in 2 years. Companies that planned their whole business around a stable price got crushed. Then in 2023, the price crashed more than 70% in a single year. Up eightfold, then down 70%. That is not a market you can build a stable factory around. And that violent swing is what finally pushed serious money toward finding another way. You see, when lithium was cheap and stable, nobody wanted the trouble of a replacement. The moment the price went insane, every battery maker on Earth suddenly cared about alternatives. And the alternative had been sitting in the research papers the whole time. Because sodium was never a secret. Scientists were studying sodium batteries back in the 1960s. Ford Motor Company built the first high-energy rechargeable sodium battery all the way back in 1966. There was a catch, though. That battery had to run at about 300 degrees Celsius to work. 300 degrees. You cannot put that in a phone. You cannot put that in a car. Then, in 1972, a researcher named Stanley Whittingham found a way to make lithium batteries work at room temperature. And that was the moment the race ended, before it really started. Lithium worked at room temperature, sodium needed 300 degrees, the money went to lithium and never looked back. So sodium sat on the shelf. Not because it was a bad idea, because it lost the funding race at the worst possible time. For decades, sodium was the runner-up nobody remembered. But sodium had two things going for it that never went away. It is everywhere, and it is cheap. So why couldn't anyone make it work at normal temperatures? What was the actual wall? The wall was size. Remember how lithium particles are tiny? Sodium particles are about 35% larger, and that extra size wrecks everything inside the battery. Here is why. Inside a lithium battery, the energy gets stored in a material called graphite. Graphite is built from layers stacked evenly, like sheets of paper in a neat pile. Lithium's small particles slide neatly between those sheets, store their charge, and slide back out. Clean and repeatable, millions of times. Now try to shove sodium's bigger particles into those same neat layers. It is like trying to park a truck in a spot painted for a bicycle. The particles are too big. They force the layers apart, they tear the structure. Within a few hundred charge cycles, the graphite is destroyed and the battery is dead. A few hundred cycles is nothing. Your phone does that in a year. So graphite, the material that made lithium batteries possible, simply would not work for sodium. That was the wall. For 30 years, nobody could get past it. And this is where the story turns. Because in the year 2000, researchers in Canada found a different material. They called it hard carbon. Hard carbon is not neat and stacked like graphite. It is the opposite. It is messy, disordered, full of irregular pockets and holes of all different shapes and sizes. Think of graphite as a perfectly organized filing cabinet, every folder in its exact slot. Now think of hard carbon as a cave full of nooks and crannies of every size. And that mess is exactly what sodium needed. The big sodium particles do not have to squeeze into a tight, even space anymore. They just settle into the irregular pockets that fit them. The structure does not get torn apart because it was never rigid to begin with. Suddenly, sodium had a home that could survive thousands of cycles. So the material problem was solved, right? Not even close. Because finding hard carbon in a lab and making it by the ton in a factory are two very different things. How do you make hard carbon? You take organic material, plant, waste, farm byproducts, even simple glucose. Then you heat it to between 1000 and 1400 degrees Celsius with no oxygen. What comes out is that messy, porous carbon. Simple to describe, brutal to control. Hard carbon has a nasty habit. It soaks up moisture from the air like a sponge, and moisture inside a battery is poison. It ruins performance and shortens life. On top of that, the size of those tiny pockets has to be controlled precisely. Too big, too small, uneven, and the battery underperforms. Getting that right at massive scale had never been done. This is where CATL comes in, and this is the part that separates a science paper from a product you can actually buy. CATL committed roughly $1.5 billion over 10 years to turn hard carbon from a lab curiosity into something they could pour out of a factory by the ton. 10 years, $1.5 billion. On a material problem that most of the industry had already given up on. They solved the moisture problem, and they learned to control the size of those pores at the atomic scale. Atomic scale means they are shaping holes measured in the size of individual atoms and doing it the same way, over and over across enormous batches. That level of control is the entire game. It is the difference between a battery that dies in a year and one that lasts for decades. And when they finished, they had a product. They call it the Naxtra. Let me tell you what it actually does, because the numbers are where this stops being a chemistry lesson and starts being a threat to a trillion-dollar market. Range first. The Naxtra delivers over 500 kilometers on a single charge. For years, people assumed sodium could never reach useful range. 500 kilometers is real driving range. That assumption is gone. Charging speed. The Naxtra hits 80% charge in 15 minutes. Pull in, plug in, and by the time you have used the restroom and grabbed a coffee, you are most of the way full. Now the number that matters most, and the one lithium cannot touch. Lifespan. The Naxtra handles more than 10,000 full charge and discharge cycles. That is roughly 3 times the lifespan of the common lithium iron phosphate battery. Charge it once every single day and it would still work reliably after 27 years. 27 years. Most cars do not survive that long. The battery would outlive the vehicle it is bolted into. Then there is the cold, the exact weakness that has haunted lithium for decades. The liquid inside the Naxtra stays fluid all the way down to minus 58 degrees Celsius, and at minus 40, it still holds about 90% of its capacity. 90%. A lithium battery in that same cold would be gasping, losing a third of its range or more. The Naxtra barely notices, and now the number that ties the whole story together. Cost. KTL produces these sodium cells at about $19 per kilowatt hour. Lithium cells run $55 to $70 per kilowatt hour. So sodium comes in at roughly a third of the price. A third, cheaper to make, longer lasting, better in the cold, safer, because sodium does not carry the same fire risk, and built from a material you can buy anywhere on Earth for almost nothing. Now you understand why that 60 gigawatt hour order sent a shock through the industry. Here's where it gets even bigger. Across all of 2025, CATL shipped about 122 gigawatt hours of energy storage products in total. That single sodium order, 60 gigawatt hours, is roughly half of everything they shipped in a year. This is not a side project anymore. This is a core product with a customer already writing checks for enormous volume. But I want to be honest with you, because this channel does not do hype without the fine print. Sodium is not going to erase lithium. It cannot. Remember why lithium won? Those tiny, light particles pack the most energy into the least weight, and weight is everything in some products. In an airplane, every gram counts. In a tiny wireless earbud, there is barely any room at all. In those places, energy per weight rules, and lithium still wins. Sodium is heavier for the same energy. That is its one real weakness, and it is not going away. So what happens next is smarter than one chemistry beating the other. CATL is already building battery packs that split the storage into 2 zones, a sodium zone and a lithium zone in the same pack, managed by software. The software decides which chemistry to lean on in the moment. Think about a freezing winter morning. The software pulls from the sodium zone because sodium laughs at the cold. On a long highway run where you need maximum range from minimum weight, it leans on the lithium zone. 2 chemistries, each doing the job it is best at, in one battery. That is likely the real future, not a winner and a loser, a partnership. Now step back and look at the whole thing, because there is a lesson buried in here that goes way past batteries. Sodium was not a new discovery. Scientists knew about it in the 1960s. The hard carbon that made it work was found in 2000. The knowledge sat in research papers for over 20 years. Better in some ways, cheaper, safer, and nobody built it. Nobody funded it. Because lithium was winning. And when something is winning, the world stops searching for a replacement. It took a violent price crash to change that. Lithium prices had to shoot up eightfold, then collapse 70%, before anyone was scared enough to open the old research and ask what if. The technology was ready 2 decades early. The pressure to use it showed up late. That is the pattern worth remembering. The better answer is often already sitting on a shelf. It waits quietly until the winning technology finally trips over its own flaws. Sodium waited 40 years for lithium to trip, and the moment it did, a Chinese company that had spent a decade and $1.5 billion getting ready was standing right there with the answer. So the next time you shake salt onto your dinner, know this. The same element is now sitting inside batteries that a Chinese company is shipping by the gigawatt hour into a market that lithium ruled alone for 30 years. The stuff on your kitchen table just became a rival to one of the most valuable materials on Earth, and the rest of the world is paying very close attention. If this gave you something new to think about, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Turn on notifications too, because the next battery story out of China is even stranger than this one. Now I want to hear from you. If a sodium battery cost you a third as much, lasted 27 years, and worked in deep cold, would you buy an electric car built on it? Or would you still hold out for lithium? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one.